Hello everybody and welcome back to OMB Reviews. I am the critic who is a cynic. Hope you're doing well, and today I'll be doing a review of Creed 3. I just got back from the theater to going to see this movie, and unfortunately this film pretty much falls flat in many ways, just like the second film did. So we'll talk about that and also talk about some comparisons between the three Creed films and just really how important it actually was that Rocky was not a part of this film. It was actually quite a void that was very much felt in this movie, especially when you look at it from a story perspective. So we'll talk about that and a couple other things. But before we get any further, though, please make sure you smash that like button, love that fire button if you're watching on Odyssey, smash the rumble button as well. Also, please make sure that you are subscribed to the channel. Have that bell notification on. That way you don't, every time a new video or live stream goes live on the channel. Ooh. Struggling with my words today, and again, apologies for the voice still being complete and utter trash. So as you can see, Creed 3, the summary of the film itself is: after dominating the boxing world, Adonis Creed, played by Michael B. Jordan, has been thriving in both his career and family life when a childhood friend and former boxing prodigy, Damien, played by Jonathan Majors, who was recently in Quantumania, resurfaces after serving a long sentence in prison. He's eager to prove that he deserves a shot in the ring. The face-off between former friends is more than just a fight. To settle the score, Adonis must put his future on the line to battle Damien, a fighter who has nothing to lose. I will say that in and of itself, had that actually been the movie, that would have been awesome. The unfortunate thing about the film is that the story is not good. It suffers from very similar faults that the second film falls from, where the story is just all around a complete and utter mess, especially when it comes down to the pacing of the film. The movie was incredibly boring. It was a little over 2 hours long, and it felt so much longer than what it actually was, because there are several stretches of the film where it is just very long, very slow conversations. And normally there are films that are able to do that very well, because the conversations and the dialogue that are written are very effective, and they are able to convey deep emotions, and they're able to push the story forward. Whereas in these sequences, instead, you just think to yourself, why do I care about any of the characters on screen right now? Why do I care about anything that they're saying? And oh my goodness, I kept checking my watch saying, oh my goodness, how much longer do we have in this movie? And then I just, of course, found out, as I was watching the film, especially towards the end of the film, when they were having another one of these incredibly slow moments, I was, oh wait, we have just about maybe 20 minutes left in the film. Oh, guess what? We still haven't gotten our training montage, as is, again, key in all Rocky franchise movies. And yes, Creed is a Rocky franchise film. Some people, for some reason, got triggered earlier when I said Creed 2 wasn't very good, and that I had concerns about, Rocky Balboa not being in the film. And they were like, I think that Rocky Balboa doesn't need to be in the film because this is a Creed movie. It's like, yes, but this is also a part of the Rockyverse. Like, this is all an extension of the Rockyverse. This is the son of Apollo Creed, who, wait, where is he from? Oh, that's right. He's from the Rocky movies. You have a lot of those different things going on. You have a lot of the music cues even still being used, a lot of the typical tropes being used also. But the problem is that when you had 20 minutes left in the movie, that's when they did the entire training montage, which was a decent length, and it was fine for what it was as far as a training montage is concerned. And then that means that you have the battle and the fight at the end, which ultimately is feeling rushed and has almost no emotional weight to it whatsoever. Nothing in the fight that happens really raises the stakes whatsoever. You don't really feel any tension. They try and do some artistic things with it, right? By trying to take it, basically, there's a sequence that happens. This really isn't spoiling much of anything, but they have a sequence that happens where they decide to have it be almost like within their minds. So the crowd is taken out of it, and it's just them in the ring, and it's all silent, and all you can hear are the body blows and all those other things. And then also, too, they're seeing each other when they were younger. I guess it was trying to convey the emotion of, that these people were friends and everything. But ultimately, it just falls flat because nothing in the film was able to really build you up to caring about them at all. When it comes to the character played by Jonathan Majors, he is so single-noted throughout the entire film, right? He is so single-noted throughout the entirety of the franchise that the entirety of this specific film, that you just don't care about him at all, right? He gives you this backstory, and he tries to be the villain that is one that you empathize with, but you don't. You don't empathize with him really at all. I mean, he just shows himself to be kind of a despicable person. And so they try to play this nuanced game of saying, hey, he's a bad guy in the film, but then also, too, he's still human. And so we're trying to, find that balance. But the balance just doesn't work because the writing ultimately is the biggest downfall of this film. It was the same thing that happened with Creed 2. The writing just wasn't there, even though that film did have Rocky Balboa, it did have Sylvester Stallone in the film, which definitely, I guess, made it slightly better. It's definitely better than this movie at the very least. That doesn't say a whole lot because even Sylvester Stallone can be in a film that doesn't have very good writing, especially when he isn't necessarily involved with the writing process nearly as much. This is also the directorial debut of Michael B. Jordan, and honestly, I don't think that this is a very good start for him. Obviously, we could probably look at the numbers, and we could look at the fact that this is getting some fair ratings, I guess. Right now, the early ratings, I go to Metacritic because here's the thing. Anyone who's going to go to Rotten Tomatoes and say, well, look at the Rotten Tomatoes score and look at the Rotten Tomatoes audience numbers doesn't know anything about Rotten Tomatoes, has not been following Rotten Tomatoes for the last several years, because the issue that has always been a part of Rotten Tomatoes, and it's become even more of an issue as of recently, is the fact that when they have the tomato meter, that does not actually include what the actual rating that the people who are putting the reviews out there are giving the film. That just means that when they posted the review, they said whether it was fresh or not. So a 90% fresh rating on Rotten Tomatoes means 90% of them chose fresh rating. But their rating could have still been a 5 out of 10, which is not a very good score for a movie. But because they chose the fresh rating, that is all that you end up seeing. If you actually dive into the numbers on Rotten Tomatoes, you can actually go into to see, for those that gave a number rating, what the average was. And typically that average tends to be very similar to what you see for the Metacritic score, because the way Metacritic works is that it takes anyone who scored it out of 5 out of 10 and puts those together. And then also anyone who gives it a letter grade, they actually have an entire system. And in fact, it even gives you like this little question mark here where you can dive into their entire methodology. It's one of the reasons why I appreciate them so much. So they are able to give actual scores, to these movies, and also how they quantify, right, a 4-star scale, how they quantify a letter grade score, and how that crosses over. And so it's, again, a lot more straightforward in that way, and they're very transparent about that. So with the same number of reviews, or actually a little bit higher than the previous films, in fact, if you go to Creed 2, that film had 45 critic reviews that were posted, 42 critic reviews for the first Creed. First off, look at this main difference, all right? It was seen as a Metacritic must-see, 82 score from critics, user score of 8.0 with 758 ratings. You jump to Creed 2, look at how many less people saw Creed 2. So that is already an indication that this film was not nearly as liked because it was not nearly as watched. But then also you have a drop of a whole point. And on a 10-point scale, guess what? A whole point is actually a pretty big deal. So you have a drop from an 82 critic score, 8 audience score, to a 66 critic score and a 7 audience score. So you see drops in both areas. And believe me, critics are not to be trusted in most regards. And then when you look to the current one, it's at a 73 critic score, and that is with 49 critic reviews. And so whether or not we're actually going to be able to get things going forward, whether or not we're going to be able to see better scores going forward is going to be a very big question, as far as whether there's going to be more critics that are going to put their reviews out there. But I would not be surprised if the audience score for this also ends up dropping, because again, why is it that we saw a drop in the audience score for Creed 2 in these raw numbers? And again, it's a much smaller sample size, but remember, it also doesn't suffer from the same issues that Rotten Tomatoes does, where they have been known to delete scores, where they have been known to play around with those numbers to try to fit whatever narrative it is that they want to push. We have to then recognize that, again, Creed 2, not nearly as good as Creed 1. And again, if you actually pay attention to the story, it's hard for anyone to argue that the story itself is good. You can still enjoy it. You can still have fun with it. There's no problem with that. But to say that the movie is good, right? By good, it means an objectively good movie. That is where it becomes a bit of a problem, because the story does not actually match that. Creed 3 suffers from the very same thing because, as I said, the story is all over the place. The pacing of the film is not good. It, again, drags and drags and drags. And if anyone is enjoying what they're seeing on screen, I'm guessing it's because you have some kind of attachment to Michael B. Jordan or Jonathan Majors, or maybe some of the things that they're talking about interest you. But as far as just a general overall part of storytelling itself, yeah, not effective, not very well done. And let's just say this movie is one that I think will very easily be forgotten, especially within the entire Rocky franchise. And again, going back to that, there is a giant void that is felt. There are things that happen in this movie where, without having Rocky in it, makes no sense to the overarching story, right? You think about the relationship that's built between those two characters of Adonis Creed and Rocky Balboa in Creed 1 and especially in Creed 2, and you look at what happens in this movie and you think, okay, there is no reason why Rocky would not be here. The fact that there's not even like a reference to Rocky, the fact that there's not even a reference to anything that's going on, kind of makes you wonder, okay, yeah, there's a bit of a problem here. All right, there's a bit of a problem, and it is not. It is, again, once again pointing to one of the other major flaws that exist within the writing itself. And so those are just a couple of examples of the writing. If I really wanted to dive further into it, I'm sure I could go line by line and point out, it's like, okay, why in the world does this make any sense? The actors playing the younger versions of these characters also not very good. They were very, very green, and that's always bad to see in movies like this. But then also Jonathan Majors, very one note. And unfortunately, especially after seeing him most recently in Quantumania, now my only knowledge of him is from those two movies. He's a pretty one note guy. I mean, yeah, he might be able to put on some characters, maybe, but ultimately, in this movie, at the very least, he has no real ups or downs whatsoever. He's just constant. He's just very consistent. And again, when you talk about acting, if you're a one-note actor, especially even if it's in a specific role, it usually isn't a good sign going forward. And so, luckily, I will say one positive thing is that Tessa Thompson isn't in the film too much, but she is in the film quite a bit. So if you don't like Tessa Thompson, then she's in it a lot. I don't think she's terrible, but also she doesn't really bring a whole lot to the table. And again, leaves a lot of questions as far as her character development as well when it comes to her hearing. And, you don't see her with the hearing aid in nearly as much as she had in previous. Again, there's a lot of questions that are left with that. So overall, if I had to give this film a grade, I'd probably give this film a D. Again, I think that there's some things that are done well. I think the fighting scenes are done well for the most part. But even I don't think are well choreographed to the point of it doesn't really build emotion, right? You actually care about what's going on in those fights in all of the the vast majority of the Rocky films. You care about even within the first Creed movie and even parts of the second Creed film. In this movie, you just don't really fall into that same method, right? You just are like, okay, it's just two people fighting, and that's all that there really is to it. And all of the background noise and all the behind the scenes things going on, or the announcers, don't add anything to it and just take away from it. And ultimately ends up being a giant bore of a movie. And I think that you could spend your time and your money better elsewhere. But those are my thoughts about it. What are your thoughts about this film? Let me know in the comment section down below. If you like this video, smash that like button, like the subscribe button. Honestly, you're all amazing, beautiful people. I'm still having the February shoutouts video at the end of these videos because I want to wait for my voice to recover somewhat before doing the March video. But I did just want to also put that out there. Again, I just wanted to shout out again to everyone who has been supporting me for February, and also anyone who's carried over into March. And if you are someone who is a new member, again, I will try and get you added in as soon as I possibly can. You guys are great. Have a wonderful day, everybody. A blessed rest of your Lent. And as always, God bless. And now for a huge special shout out to all of my Patreon, locals, and Subscribe Star members who are at the Keeper of the Bifrost level and above, starting off with Father Luca Illick, Garrett Searles, Chris from the 80s, who you can check out over on YouTube by the same name, Hymir Irie Hymason, Joe Horn, Jonathan Carney, Orange Hat Reviews, you can check out at his YouTube channel by the same name as well, Laura, the Modern Major General story, Rosetta Allen, who you can check out at her YouTube channel, Eagle Rider, and Miss Martin Muses, which goes by the same name on YouTube. Thank you all very much for supporting me over on Patreon. And also for my Subscribe Star peeps, we got Matt317. Check out his Twitch channel by the same name. Fast Reaction, Mr. Roy, J-Rod the Beer Guru, and ZK-Man, who you can check out over at xtheboundaries.co. And a special shout out to the R. And also, lastly, to my locals members, starting off with Miss Minnesota Hockey Fan, How About a Hockey Player, J.H. Schwalbach, Brett D90, and the amazing lawyer Robert Barnes. Thank you all very much for supporting me for the month of February. You guys are all fantastic. If you want your name shouted out, access to exclusive podcasts, and exclusive giveaways, check out the top link in the video description below. Anyway, you guys are all great. Have a wonderful rest of your day, everybody. And as always, God bless.